Hey Blocksters, welcome to the Blockchain Hustler, a show where we talk to the leading founders, creators, celebrities, and disruptors who are hustling in Web3. Today's guest is David Bianchi. David is an actor, an artist, and the creator of Cinema, which is spoken word cinema. He's known for his roles in Unsolved on Netflix, Sweat and Years on Amazon Prime, and Ruthless on BET. David is the first to bring poetic cinematic films to the blockchain. He's one of the leaders in long-form cinematic NFTs and was one of the first curated artists ever to display NFTs at the LA Art Show in 2021. Much of David's work focuses on socially conscious issues to elevate the artistic conversation while raising money for nonprofit organizations that are working to change the problems that his art addresses. David, thank you so much for joining us today on the Blockchain Hustler. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. Blockchain Hustler. I love that moniker. And thank you very much for your company. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. That was a very, very lovely introduction. And yeah, I guess also as a tidbit, we're coming back for season 2 of Resident Alien, which is a show that I'm currently on, which is a Universal show for sci-fi. It's on Peacock as well. I'm really excited about that one.
I love it. You literally do it all. You're everywhere. You're the epitome of a hustler, let alone a blockchain hustler. And before we dive in, can you just tell us about your background as an actor and as an artist and how your journey led you into Web3?
I'm Thank you for the question. I am an actor, independent filmmaker. I got my Screen Actors Guild card in 2004. I'm classically trained. I got my theater degree from Arizona State. I go back to 2004 because I think it's very important that from an artist's perspective that you understand the artist's journey. Like what's the coolest thing we love about an artist? It's the genesis. It's where did they come from, right? So I got my SAG card in 04 doing extra work, all right? I did extra work for about 2-3 years just to sort of make ends meet, supplementing my income as a waiter for 2.5 years. And then eventually I was a bartender for an additional 13 years in Los Angeles. It's very important that I say that because as artists, everybody wants the red carpet, but nobody wants to be a waiter, right? And you know, when I first came to LA, I came to LA saying, I am an actor. This is what I do. One of my most important mottos is attacking the island and burning the boat. Right? There's nothing behind me. I have to move avant-garde, move forward, and continue to break ground in whatever it is that I choose to do or set my heart and my intentions to. I started producing independent film back in 04, and I produced my first spoken word film back in 2006. And, you know, back then I didn't know that it was cinema. I was just doing what my heart told me I needed to do, you know, because in the in-betweens while you're hustling the agent, hustling the headshot, you know, you got to have something to keep you inspired on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Like you can't do the big things without the little things. And so for me, I had the open mic, and eventually that transitioned into using my skills as a filmmaker into creating experimental films told in poetry that happen to be socially conscious. I've been an activist for as long as I can remember, since early 2000. And so artivism has been a big part of who I am and still obviously is to this day. And I continue to produce independent film, and now I'm a member of the Producers Guild. I'm a member of the Television Academy. I have over 100 professional film and television credits. And, you know, those skill sets were exactly my introduction to blockchain. And like so many other people in this world, we found NFTs, or people found blockchain, you know, during the pandemic. When we're all looking in a million directions, we don't know which way is up, north, south, east, or west. I got fortunate. I ended up shooting 14 episodes of a show called Ruthless with Mr. Tyler Perry during the pandemic. So we were flown out on a private jet. We lived in the bubble. We lived on the lot. It was a really incredible experience. But you know, once that ended, just, you know, we had a side conversation earlier. Once the pandemic hit, we just didn't know. So me having been involved in collecting cryptocurrency since 2017, I was already inspired by the underlying technology of the blockchain, right? But so the learning curve to non-fungible tokens was pretty easy, right? But once I heard about this $69 million sale at Christie's by Beeplecrap, who's his actual artist name, and I've been following Beeple on Instagram for about 1.5 years preceding that sale, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking interesting, right? I'm like, let me look into this thing and see what the hell's going on over here. And as I started to tap into like Clubhouse spaces and really started to listen to some of the thought leaders back then, and this is March 2021, I started to ask myself the real question. Okay, if I'm going to enter a blockchain, how do I want to enter blockchain? Like, what artistic voice do I want to come from? Like, I'm an abstract contemporary painter. I'm a screenwriter. I do a lot of this kind of stuff, but I'm known as an actor and as a filmmaker, but also as a poet. And so I was like, okay, let me see if I can figure out how to enter with Spinema. So let's go back 5 or 6 years from now, or 8 years ago from today, I came up with the moniker Spinema. So why am I the guy, right? Spinema, I hold the trademark because nobody in the world is producing high concept films that are told entirely in poetry that are socially conscious. And what do I mean by that? This isn't like, you know, me in front of a student government building with an iPhone telling you a poetic story. No, this is oftentimes, you know, award-winning cinematographers, Emmy-nominated directors, sometimes 30, 40 person crews. Like, these are productions. You know, and so those paintbrushes are very unique. There are very few good filmmakers that also happen to be poets. I just don't know them, right? I know a lot of great poets that are actors. A lot of actors are poets. I know a lot of great filmmakers that aren't poets. But to put all those together into one jar is very uniquely David Bianchi, right? And so, you know, in March 2021, I was trying to figure out how I was going to enter the space. And so I minted the first award-winning spoken word film as an NFT. And ironically, the team of gentlemen that bought the $69 million Beeple bought my Genesis.
Oh, there you go.
Which was wild. It brought it full circle. But the thing is, even at the closing of the auction, I didn't know who Metaverse was. I just didn't know. I hadn't connected the dots yet because you're so much in the zone of doing what you're doing. So that's how I entered the space. And, you know, at that time, nobody was minting films. And I was able to mint 250 megabytes on the Ethereum blockchain, which back then was pretty unheard of and just hadn't really been done yet before at this degree. So that's the short version, if there was one.
No, that's incredible. And I know you have so many incredible projects that I definitely want to dive into. One of them being Senses, which is your audio, visual, poetic, generative NFT collection. And I just want to dive into this because I'm just so fascinated by how it's focused on like healing. There's psychedelic art, there's music that activates the chakras. Tell me how you came up with this project.
Well, I first have to really attribute it to the blockchain and the crypto art community at large. And it's very important because if I hadn't become a self-sustaining artist through my previous works, I would not have the capacity to think at such an expansive level, right? It's physiology. When we remove something, we invariably make space for something else. So when you remove the anxiety and the angst and the frustration and resentment of needing to punch into someone else's clock, having to supplement your artistry through a discipline that has nothing to do with your art, there's a piece of you that belongs to a nightclub or belongs to a bar or belongs to a graphic arts company or whatever it is that you're doing before crypto art. So the self-sustainability gave me the inspiration to be expansive, and the technology gave me the inspiration to be expansive. It was, I would say, the first NFT NYC, the first one I went to, which was probably October 2021. I came up with this idea. So we're now almost a year since it started. I was like, well, I was noticing Discords and Twitters. We treat people really badly in Discords and Twitters. People are really, really tough behind their avatars. Most of those people that are tough behind their avatars would get socked in the mouth on the streets of New York if they spoke that way, you know. But unfortunately, we don't realize the damage that we create when we send messages like this. And I thought I needed to create some art that was going to be, I should say, a departure from my existing poetry on the blockchain, which is socially conscious and oftentimes very polarizing and very confrontational. I wanted to create something that was uplifting, that was inspiring, that would give the crypto art community an opportunity to get introspective and to heal and to think about where they are in this complicated world. So I started going on a journey of writing 100 poems. And so I wrote 100 original poems that are inspired by the 5 human senses: sight, touch, taste, sound. I think I missed one. Smell. And so once I wrote those poems, that was basically the genesis of the idea. And I talked to a couple people that had marketplaces, including Lisa at Async, and I pitched the idea that I'd like to create a poetry drop that would somehow be informed by artificial intelligence. I didn't really have 4 walls on it yet. And she says, well, we have a technology that just might be able to support that. So I then said, okay, well, I need a visual artist, but I also want this to be a full immersive experience. I want people to experience these NFTs and be able to escape. Whether you mint one and own one or not, you can still go on OpenSea and you can listen to 3 or 4 of them and watch them and just pause and get away from the chaos of whatever is happening in your life at that particular moment. It really is something that is just sort of like an olive branch that I wanted to offer to the crypto art community. So connecting with Dogan Demir, my lead artist, we talked about what the art would be, and I loved his generative art. So for anyone that looks at this collection, all this is made from code. None of this is done by hand, right? Mm-hmm. And so we use fractals as the basis of it because fractals actually exist in nature. So now I'm tethering nature to humankind in the 5 senses, right? There's a connection there. But I was like, let's take it to another level. Can we actually create art that's inspired by my voice? And he said yes. So we recorded haikus and then took mathematical data from the wave recordings and used that data to inspire the code that creates the psychedelic generative art that is the face of the senses collection. And wow. Each sense is a different color. So like blue is sight because the most beautiful thing we see is the sky. Sound is green because we hear Mother Nature, and so on and so forth, to add a different layer of connectivity. Now, to take it a step further, I partnered with Please and Thank You, who's a globally renowned EDM DJ and producer, and charged him with the idea of let's produce music for these. And he first came back with some ideas, and I was like, well, let's take it a step further. Let's actually create music in what's called the solfeggio frequencies, which is a series of Hertz frequencies that are scientifically proven through music therapy to connect with the mind, body, and spirit, and as you said, heal the chakras. So now we've got a connected NFT collection that is philosophical and emotional from a poetic perspective, healing from a music perspective, but also healing from a visual perspective. And it's 1,000 ones of ones, and the project is still currently minting. We're about 60% sold out. And some of the biggest collectors in the space have bought into it, including CL7, Krista Kim, Corey Van Loo, Dave Krugman, NFT Now did a dedicated story on the collection. And so I'm very, very excited. It's a beautiful project that I believe will stand the test of time, and we'll create IRL activations where people will be able to experience an audio, visual, sound bath experience through the poetry. So, and that will be led by guided meditations and so on and so forth. So there's so much potential that this will lead into, and eventually we'll create the 6th sense, for example. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Final piece of that is anyone who acquires one of these, I transfer the republishing rights of the poetry to the owner of the NFT.
Amazing.
So, 5 years from now, you will have the resell and republishing rights to an original David Bianchi poem.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. I love the healing aspect of it, how it's like so healing. Obviously, it's such a meditative experience. And giving back to the community through these NFTs is so incredible. Obviously, you also use your projects to bring awareness and raise money for socially conscious efforts. I do want to hear more about your Spinema film, I Can't Breathe, and how it led to being minted as an NFT.
Sure. To my earlier thought about the genesis is that, this is sort of a PSA for any artists that are out there listening to this. My advice to those artists is before you enter the space and start minting and putting yourself out there, discover your voice, right? Our voices are always evolving through our artistry because as human beings, we're always evolving. So our art does the same. But I think that you want to enter the space with a certain amount of certainty of your craft, right? And that takes practice, that takes failure, that takes hours, hundreds, thousands of hours of working and working and working, learning how to handle a paintbrush, learning how to work in Blender, learning how to, play that guitar, strum that guitar properly, write poetry, understanding the mechanics of your art form. That's really important because once you step out and you start pitching your work, you have to have a certain amount of confidence about what you're presenting into the ecosystem for people to be interested in your story, but interested enough to actually acquire your art. Because if you don't believe it, who the hell will?
Right.
And that comes from an understanding that you have actually reached a level of excellence with your craft, right? And so I say that because Spinema, I had been making poetic films for 17 years, 16 years up to this point. So I had already forged the steel. Like, I don't know how to make bad movies. It's out of my system, right? From a technical perspective. And so I produced this film in the heat of the civil rights movement, and I made it just because it was sort of like my soliloquy to the murder of Mr. George Floyd and what it stood for me. And the project got picked up by Deadline. They wrote about it, and KTLA, they broadcast it on, they actually resurfaced a show called Breaking Bias to showcase the film, to talk about what artists were doing during this time. And so I was like, okay, I found a platform that allowed me to mint larger files, but I had to sort of compress it in a way to get it under 250 megabytes. And I figured that out. And then using my skills as an independent filmmaker, I just created, marketing assets. And I went on Clubhouse and I didn't know the answers. I didn't know. I literally I did not know what a smart contract did. I did not know what fractionalization was. I didn't know what limited edition, I kind of had a sense, right? I didn't even know what that Ethereum NFT was, an ERC 721. I didn't know any of that technical stuff, right? But I just went in like blind. I was touching the walls. I was like, I'm gonna figure this. I'm attacking the island. I'm gonna burn the boat. Attack the island. Look, and if it didn't sell, that was perfectly fine with me too, because I know the work was good, right?
Right.
So going into this, what I did was I put myself under the gauntlet. I actually set a 5-day countdown to the first day of auction. So when I minted it, all right, I got 5 days to make this thing pop. That was literally what it was. And I put in 18-hour days. I was not sleeping. I was hustling, keeping spreadsheets of who I was talking to, figuring out who were the players, who were the influential people in the space, blah, 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 blah. And I just kept knocking on doors and knocking on doors. And I led with my heart. I led with honesty. I led with integrity. I performed the poem in these clubhouse rooms, and people were just really, really touched by it. And as a result of people being so touched by it, they were willing to support what I was doing, which is brand new. A spoken word film as an NFT is a one of one. What is that? Now this is pre-Bored Apes, right? So fine art was still the hot topic as it related to collectibles in the NFT space. Luckily, I ended up knocking on enough doors. I got it to a guy named Paulo Moreno, and Paulo got it to a guy named Farouk, and then they were actually hosting the biggest rooms at the time. And I remember we did clubhouse rooms of 4,000 people. Wow. Not a dry eye in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think back on how many times I wept out of sheer happiness and joy, that I finally felt like my art had found a home. Like I finally felt like my art had real purpose, because it was being seen by not the coffee shop poets that can't move the needle. It wasn't being seen by the C or B level independent festival circuit on Saturday afternoon program with 9 other short films that are mostly crap. It was being exalted as a standalone piece of art. And it was being exalted by highly sophisticated, young, influential, well-to-do communities of people that could really help move the needle. This thing auctioned successfully, and we donated all the proceeds to the George Floyd Memorial Foundation. Forbes picked up the story. At this point, I've been in the Screen Actors Guild since 2004. I've done a bunch of TV shows. I wasn't ever in Forbes. Nobody cared for the most part. It's like you're an actor filling a slot, right? And when I found the diversity and I found the beauty for art in the NFT community, and I saw the potential, I said, I'm never turning back. Wow. And since March 2021, I don't think I've had a single day, I'm talking about Saturdays and Sundays included, I don't think I've had a single day where I've put in less than 6 hours into Web3 and NFT work.
Wow.
Most of my days in Web3 are at least 10 to 14.
It's so life-changing for so many people and so many creatives, and that story is extremely inspiring, my gosh. And just going off of that, we've seen the power that blockchain technology has to raise money for something obviously you raise money for the George Floyd Memorial Foundation. People are raising money for aid for Ukraine or raising awareness for women's reproductive rights. Can you explain to our audience how blockchain technology can be used to raise money and awareness for social issues, and just how it's just more efficient or optimal than traditional ways?
So the first question is that we have free reign as creators to mint or create NFTs of whatever we choose. It could be a poem, it could be a song, it could be a painting, a photograph, you name it. And whatever cause you attach to that is directly related to who you are and what you stand for. So if you have a community of people that believe in you as an artist and that believe in your cause, you can raise cryptocurrency for those particular ventures. In my case, it's been a variety of ventures. I mean, I probably donated over $60,000 in 2021 to various nonprofits that are tethered to the subject matter that I've discussed. And I continue to build bridges with 501c3s. So the other thing that's great about it is, take the Ukraine DAO, for example. Like, that was a massive push, and they raised, I think it was like 4 or 5 million. I'm getting the number wrong, but it was a staggering amount of money. But what that does is it creates massive optics around these particular initiatives. So not only are you bringing money, you're also bringing optics, you're bringing community, and you're bringing a new model to approach funding nonprofits, because 501c3s, and IGOs, they struggle to raise money. They really, really do. And when we have a unified push in the blockchain, we can make it happen, and we can give money to those organizations. As far as the efficiency, I mean, that's philosophical and up for debate, but I'm a blockchain bull. So I've actually onboarded a couple nonprofits into blockchain. There are platforms like NGiven, for example, that basically act as fiscal sponsors between a nonprofit, right, and the blockchain. So people can go to, like, say, for example, New Earth is an organization that I helped support that with, and now they can receive 80 cryptocurrencies. I mean, including Dogecoin and Avalanche, for example, in their direct portal on their website. So there's a lot of ways that we can integrate nonprofits into the blockchain, and from a transfer mechanism, it makes it obviously a lot easier. You don't have to deal with fees. You don't have to deal with international wire transfers, the time efficiency, and also the ledger, for example. Like, the ledger doesn't lie. Right. And also from a tax perspective, if a 501c3 is enrolled in the proper fashion, they obviously are not going to have a tax burden on that equity. And if they choose to store that equity and the asset appreciates in value, then they turn around and they actually have more fiat than they would have had when they received the currency, if the currency is appreciating. Right. And I think that more importantly, it's about the education of not just digital currency, because we've been working with digital currency for the last decade. It just hasn't been tethered to the blockchain. Right. It's just been on a bank ledger, for example. So digital currency is nothing new, but cryptocurrency is new. And so I think there's also a certain amount of education that will lend itself to mass adoption. I mean, even the United Way accepts cryptocurrency. Salvation Army, for example. There's a lot of these sort of larger organizations that are doing this already.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I want to dive into one of your cinema NFTs, Break the Bars, and how I think it's so cool how that was the first film to hold a red carpet premiere in the Metaverse in Decentraland. And you had over like 1,800 attendees. That's just so cool. Coming from somebody who has worked a ton of red carpets in Hollywood in real life, I think doing it in the Metaverse is incredible. Do you think this is the future of Hollywood?
I think it's a part of the future of Hollywood. I don't think it's the future of Hollywood. Think about Netflix, for example. It's not the future of Hollywood. It's part of the future of Hollywood. It's part of the present of Hollywood, right? This model where wait a second, we're going to Netflix first and not going to theatrical like at all. Like Ryan Gosling or whomever else is number one on a call sheet. It's not going to theaters, huh? Right? Okay, so we have to figure out what each medium is good for from a suitability perspective. The metaverse in general is still very, very clunky. The fidelity, the graphics, the environments, whether it's VR, or whether it's AR, or whether you're looking at it on a computer screen, we're still not quite there from a mass adoption perspective. And so when we know that to be true, there's only a certain amount of people that are available to attend any specific event in the metaverse at any given moment in time. Forgive the airplane overhead. And so if we know that to be true, we can earmark a certain amount of energy to marketing or premiering films or showing content in the metaverse, knowing that to be true. There's always going to be the physical experience of going to see a movie. Like, I just saw Top Gun in a movie theater, state-of-the-art theater that's 4DX.
Mm.
which was wild. I literally felt like I was in like Epcot Center. Like I got air, I got water splat. Like it was exhilarating. I mean, if there's any way to see Top Gun, that's the way, right? But there's going to be some projects that, you know, are smaller projects or independent projects that may be geared more towards the metaverse. And maybe it's a combination of, you know, theatrical release, television release, streaming release, and metaversal release, right? The thing that the metaverse offers that all those other platforms don't is digital ownership and marketplace access. Because let's not get it twisted. Metaverses are marketplaces, right? They just operate on their own currencies. But when I go into Decentraland, I can buy a wearable. I can buy an augmented reality movie poster as a collectible that might give me access to an AMA with David Bianchi. I can buy a virtual movie ticket that will give me access to this premiere and a red carpet experience where I can have a creative photograph in front of the step and repeat with all the crazy wearables that I spent money on to help me stand out. I can now proliferate that on Twitter. I can pop that up on my Discords. I can use that as my showcase of where I was. I can mint a POAP, which is proof of attendance protocol, to verify unequivocally that I was there. That's also a collectible. These are things that you can't get in the physical space. And so there are certain things that the metaverse offers that the real world will never be able to offer. I do think that as we move forward, there will be films that will be produced just for the metaverse. Just if we look at like 3D technology, eventually we got to the point that we built stereoscopic cameras, right? I think that eventually we'll produce hardware that will be able to shoot specifically for virtual environments that will get really, really good. There's already technology there, but it's going to get better. So I hope that I gave you a decent enough answer, because I think that everything will sort of work congruently. As the metaverse grows, Hollywood will gently adapt, because Hollywood is still very like, yo, I don't want to get experimental, because they don't need to be. Like Universal doesn't need to get experimental. Like they greenlight a movie and the money's there and they just go, right? They do want to tap into the culture and the community, which is why they're here, because eyeballs drive equity. So there's that component to it. But as far as who's going to win, and I know this is just a divergence, but I absolutely believe that the independents are the ones that are going to win in Web3 film, Web3 cinema, and the metaverse. And there's one reason why, because we don't suffer from intellectual property entanglements. That's one of the biggest, most important things that, especially as it relates to cinema, which is such a huge collaborative effort, is who holds the IP. Like if you look at a DC comic, or if you look at a Marvel comic, or if you look at one of these tentpole pictures, there's so much IP entanglement that so many people have to come to the table to actually like mint an NFT around an intellectual property, that it's almost so expensive and so convoluted that it just, I think at this point, just isn't going to happen. Like you can't, how do you mint Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like who owns that? And that's why, you know, I love Quentin Tarantino. He's one of my heroes, but you know, that's why he's in sort of the entanglement that he's in right now with Miramax, as a result of, you know, who owns Pulp Fiction.
So true. And speaking of the community aspect of it, there's, you know, celebrities like Paris Hilton who have been outspoken about obviously how exciting the Web3 space is, but also just how inclusive the communities in Web3 are, and especially compared to that of Hollywood. I want to hear your perspective. How would you describe the Web3 culture in general, and then also in comparison to Hollywood?
Yeah, first off, I really applaud Paris for what she has done, what she continues to do. I think that one of the most powerful things that I found about the NFT community is how available and generous people are with their time, their ideas, their desire to help, their resources. Like when I was a noob in March 2021 and I'm minting this experimental short film, I had all the questions in the world, and I was going into Clubhouse rooms and there was no question that was too noob. Like if I asked what's a marketplace? Like Marketplaces is ABC. What does it mean to mint? Okay, cool. Like all these like really like C-level questions, people answered for me and didn't make me feel badly.
Right.
And they're like, yo, you should talk to this person. We are in a community where we are each one, give one, take one, teach one. That's what happens. And it's very unusual.
Yeah.
When you think about Hollywood, because Hollywood is very cool kids gated. It's who you know, what you know, why you know, what do you have to offer? What do you bring it to the table? What's in it for me? Right?
Right.
And so I found that very unusual. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the early days of the rave scene when like peace, love, unity, and respect meant something. Right. And it was all inclusive. It wasn't about like a $400 ticket or whatever it was. It was like little ticket, go to a map point, show up at this thing. As long as you're there to dance and have a good time, come on in, let's vibe. And there are no fist fights. Like people just don't fight at raves. It just doesn't happen because it's the frequency of the EDM party, right? And where we are now in NFTs really much reminds me of that. It's like a peace, love, unity, and respect. It's a plur that we have going on. Now, I say that with caution because it ain't always going to be this way. It's going to change, right? So we enjoy it while we have it. And that, I think, is really what's very, very attractive to me. But the most important thing for anybody that is bi-curious or considering the NFT community or tapping into Web3, I always say this most important thing is this. Do you know what the blockchain is? Are you inspired by the blockchain? And do you see the long-term future potential of the blockchain? Because if you're not inspired by that, you're not going to be successful in this space. Like you can't set out to be a chef if you're not inspired by flavors, tastes, foods, herbs. You have to be inspired by the basics of the trade. And the basics of the NFT trade is the blockchain, right? If I'm not inspired by that, how am I going to be inspired by an NFT? So that to me, that's the most important thing, number one. And then to your question about inclusivity, it is all inclusive from anyone that wants to come in and anyone that raises their hand and says, hey, I need some help. Because I host a weekly Twitter Spaces with Swan Sit and Tal Navarro called Doxed. And we donate our time to offer information to the community that is transparent and that is helpful and that is nurturing. We just did an 1.5-hour room yesterday on security and people getting scammed. We don't have to do this, but we enjoy it. We do it because we enjoy it, because it was given to me freely. But the other thing to consider is that from an inclusivity perspective, it's all there. But from a diversity perspective, it's not there, right? If we look at Silicon Valley, or we look at technology, if we look at fintech in general, it's predominantly, and I'm not making this up, it's predominantly male and Caucasian. It is very, very non-represented by women and non-represented by people of color. And part of the work that I do from a subconscious level is to be a front man, because obviously I'm an actor, but to lead with good work so I can inspire other poets, so I can inspire other filmmakers, so I can inspire other creatives and be a trusted voice for those individuals that want to enter the space and do it in an honest way.
Beautiful. Oh, beautifully said. Thank you so much. And just kind of from your perspective, what are your predictions for the future of Hollywood and Web3 and how film and TV will evolve? Like, do you see blockchain technology changing the way maybe like actors get paid or creatives behind the scenes, how they receive royalties and residuals? Kind of like what we're seeing with music artists entering the space. Just from your perspective, what do you think will happen?
I think that the blockchain is going to be, within the next 5 years, will be somehow connected and tethered to everything that we know and do, not just from a media perspective, from an IP perspective, and from a data tracking perspective. I'm talking about like your vehicle history, your VIN number, your blood type, your medical records, anything related to data. Because let's not forget that an NFT is metadata that's locked on the blockchain that can't be manipulated, broken, or destroyed on an open ledger. In other words, it's fucking data, right? Art happens to be the representation of that data, and fine art made NFTs sexy, right? So that's important. So if I know that to be true, Hollywood stepping into this, or it stepping into Hollywood, is inevitable. We live in a generation where the idea of digital ownership is still very foreign to us. Very much like in the 80s, the idea of a telephone without a cord was foreign to them, right? And so as we continue to push the boundaries of the technology and the new generation starts to step up, there's going to be a generation from now where the idea of not being able to own something digitally will be foreign, right? And so if we look at it from that metric, it's inevitable that film and media will be a part of that movement, just like music is now as well, because media, motion picture, is still to this day the strongest form of communication. Whether it be news broadcasts, whether it be short films, episodic television, or red carpet interviews, people are engaged by light, picture, and sound. So what does that mean for the proliferation of film and TV? I think that the independents are going to find a big glow of sunshine, and that will be from a creative perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And eventually the studios will start to catch up, right? Because again, they don't need to be experimental, but eventually they will. I mean, Samsung has already built technology that is NFT integrated screens that connect to the blockchain. So you could sit there in your living room and you can buy digital art from your remote control. So if that's already happening, well, the other thing is going to happen. And as we have advances in technology and the blockchain gets more robust and it gets sturdier and it gets more reliable, and we figure out a way that wallets can become mass adopted, then the things that we do are going to fall into that pot, right? You know, a great analogy is like, once the technology was there and everybody was able to drive, everybody owns a car. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But where we are now is that like the idea of NFTs and digital ownership is really sort of ideal, but we're still the same 300,000 people that are recirculating the same money. Right. And so once we get wallets to the point that they're easy as a click, once wallets are as easy as Instagram, boom, the doors are going to blow off. But we've got to get to the point that wallets are easy, and coupled with wallets is trust, right? And consumer confidence in the blockchain, because there's still a lot of consumer speculation around cryptocurrency because of some of the negative hyperbole that revolves around crypto, and that's from a variety of sources. But if you look at our contemporaries, if we look at like Mike Novogratz, if we look at Gary Vaynerchuk, if you look at Mark Cuban, if you look at Paris Hilton, and so on the list ad nauseum, don't listen to me. You know, listen to Kathy Wood, listen to some of the smartest people in the world. And I think that's a good compass to follow.
Oh my gosh, incredible. Well, geez, listening to you, you're so knowledgeable and insightful on all of this. So thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up, I know that you'll be attending the Future Shape 360 event by Metanoise this coming weekend in Denver. Can you just tell us about your relationship with that community, what you'll be contributing to the event?
I'm over the moon to go back to Denver. I was there doing a showcase at East Denver. I did something at the Denver Art Museum. I was actually performed I Can't Breathe at the Denver Art Museum. And so showed the film in real time and performed the poetry to the film in real time. It was really special. But as far as FS360, they're putting together something really unique. Something really high level, something really luxurious, and it's a really tight community of thought leaders, builders, and thinkers, obviously you included. And I'm looking forward to not just having a good time and showing a lot of teeth. Hey, I'm also looking forward to, you know, forging new relationships and also nurturing some existing relationships. I will be there sort of connecting dots and having fun. But on Sunday, I'm going to be doing a 20-minute keynote talk on film in the metaverse and cinema and NFTs, and talking about a lot of the things that we've touched on today. Also going to be making a huge announcement there as well, which I'll keep quiet for now. That's basically my role there, is to be supportive and do what Web3 would want me to do, which is to be an evangelist and suit up and show up to the best of my ability. And I'm excited. I mean, you know, Deadmau5, Blau, you know, so many other great people are going to be there. My dear friend Jay Rosenzweig will be there. He's an incredible entrepreneur, humanitarian. You know, Tal Navarro, I think Alyssa Jacobs is going to be there. It's going to be a lot of great speakers that I'm looking forward to connecting with.
Oh my gosh, it'll be so incredible. And one last thing. So at Blockster, we highlight leaders and pioneers in Web3 who are hustling on the blockchain. I want to know, what makes you a Blockster, also known as a blockchain hustler, would you say?
Um, I mean, what quantifies a hustler, right? Hustle is really subjective. I think what makes me eligible for that category is the body of work that I have amassed in the blockchain since March 2021. Let's just say April 2021. So April, May, June, July. In 15 months, a lot has happened, and that doesn't happen by accident, right? It happens by dedication, by focus, by tenacity. And real, to a certain degree, workaholism. But all that stuff is led by inspiration.
Right.
Any hustler out there is led by inspiration. That's what they're led by. Whether you're trying to listen, films aren't made with money. Films are made with inspiration. Money follows inspiration. And the same thing applies to film. It applies to startups. It applies to venture capital. VC money follows inspiration. And inspiration, as long as it's paired with proper execution, money will come. So that's why I think puts me in that category, because I am viciously inspired by this. And I am not going anywhere. This is only the beginning. And I'm looking forward to seeing, to be quite honest, what 2030 is going to bring.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to see everything that you have to offer moving forward. I am following every move that you make in Web3. And for everybody listening, how can they follow you, connect with you, and just keep up with everything that you're doing?
Sure. I'm pretty accessible. Twitter, David Bianchi. Instagram, David Bianchi _official. I'm on pretty much most major platforms. If you reach out to me, feel free to. My DMs are open on Twitter. I try to get back to people in a reasonable amount of time. Every week, 10 a.m. Or every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have Doxed, where we have an open discussion with Swan Sit and Tal Navarro, as I mentioned. I also do Census Sundays on Twitter, and that's Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is a room that we focus on mind, body, and spirit through the Census platform. And, do that if I'm not on a set somewhere. But I just love to help. That's what I want to do. I want to help people the way they've helped me. And I hope that this conversation illustrated that.
Yeah. With all of the knowledge that you brought and your expertise, you've certainly helped a lot of people through this conversation. So thank you, David, so much for your time today. And thank you for joining us on the Blockchain Hustler.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'll see you in Denver.
See you in Denver.